It's Alexandria the Good back at it again with the brand new boredom buster in Blender, and it's gonna blow your freaking hair back. That was me when I made this. So we're gonna start by getting rid of that default cube and adding in an empty reference. I saw this picture and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to try to do this in Blender. And even though it didn't come out looking like this pretty much at all, it was still a really good starting point. So obviously you want to add in a UV sphere to mimic the shape of that space object and to shade it smooth. Then you want to add in a volume empty. And this is like my other tutorial featuring the space candy where we made up the clouds. You want to do the same technique to add a bit of fog around that space object. So you want to add both of those modifiers. And then make sure that it knows what object to focus on, that first sphere. And you want to play a bit with these values to try to get a look that you want. So here I am just splitting the screen and setting up the camera. So I have what it would look like in the end on one side, and then I can still play around with everything on the other side. So adjust that camera. I switched to an orthographic view because that makes it seem more cinematic and dramatic. Then we're going to head over to the shader editor and build up the world that the space object is going to inhabit. So you can either do an HDRI, which is typical, or an actual photo of space, or just set it to black, whatever your preference is. Of course, I like to try all of them and see what comes out. And then of course, to see anything, we have to add the light. So I'm moving it around and I'm trying to mimic the photo because I really like the dramatic shading going on. And I ended up not really liking the actual photo of space that much. So I just toggled with the strength and brought it pretty much down to black. And now it's time to play around with the shading of the space object. So I added in an emission shader and a mix shader like I did with the other tutorial. And I want to see how it will look combined. And you can pause here for the entire node setup. It's a short tutorial, so I didn't think you'd want to see all that. It gets a little complicated, but still pretty simple. It's really fun to play around with all of these values and see what they do. Again, nothing is set in stone. Everything is totally free and fun. I have the absolute most fun just popping in different pictures and into the displacement and see how that affects the shape. Like here I ended up with a sort of space potato, and it's not ultimately what I wanted, but I thought, let me just keep pushing the boundaries here and see what I end up with. So now that volume that we added, it needs a little more flare. So let's add a different color, play around with the density, and again, just see what can happen. At this point, I thought, let me just make as many different planets using as many different textures and colors as I can. And it was so fun. I thought to myself, like, I could just keep doing this all night. And I pretty much did. And then I went back again and did it all over. And then I was like, okay, let me make a tutorial. So you just want to be careful with that voxel amount and make sure that you don't crash your computer. So experiment a little bit, but maybe be a little conservative depending on your setup. And then now it's time to render this out. I like to change it to JPEG because it just produces a smaller file size. And once you render that out, you can go to the compositor. In the compositor, I love to add a glare node just to see what it's going to do with the image. And because the scene is really, really dark, you want to lower the threshold so it has a more pronounced effect. Otherwise, you might not see much of a change. And you can also go over to render properties and add bloom. And that produces a really big effect. And that's pretty much it. Subscribe for more tutorials like this and let me know what you think. Okay, bye.